Hello and welcome to Don Catchment Rivers Trust's audio series on the River Don, which brings together people's memories and stories from their lives in connection to the river in Doncaster and the surrounding area. Throughout each episode, we explore a different theme, and in this episode, the theme is industry, skill, and craft. We've woven together 9 different interviews, which were each recorded separately, which bring history to life with their memories of working life in relation to the river. There's a rich variety of work from coal to lime to angling, as we will hear.
I've lived in Denby for the past 73 years. I've worked in both mines, Denby Main and KB. But the seam I worked in at Denby Main was what they call angot. No machinery, just had a pick and shovel. We had pick ponies, pried coal off the coal face, broke it up, loaded it into tubs, and then very physical work. So I did 10 years of that. It was right on the River Don. We had a very good local hospital in Denby as well. Fullerton Hospital. It was built by the miners. Roughly all the miners just go there for the injuries, didn't they? Where I work, you see, I've had all them fingers busted eating away in that hammer sometime or another. And it makes a bit of a mess of it, tell you. And mine has contributed to it at the wages every week, you know.
My mum was put in charge of the ferry boat at Ferry Farm, which was flat-bottomed. It didn't have sides. It had a plank and a couple of uprights at the back. But if you wanted to cross the ferry and there were 20 people, most of them would be standing up with nothing to hang on to. Denby and Cadeby Home Coal, they'd bought the land, had horses to take out the coal for the miners. Some of the large horses might need medication or might have a damaged leg or whatever, but getting it over wasn't easy on the ferry boat. So each leg would be tied to each post, and then the vet, and usually my grandfather, would be standing on one side of it trying to keep it calm, while my mum would be taking the ferry boat across. It wasn't easy. Waddington's made all the ferry boats, this one and the one at Mexborough. And they named it after one of the committee members of Denby and Cadeby Home Coal, Mr. George Smith, but he had a big tash and was always known as Tashy. So they named the ferry boat Tashy. So the last ferry boat was called Tashy. So, yes, it was just all the stories. If I wasn't feeling very well, I'd say to my mum, tell me stories. She'd go through all the old stories, all about Tashy and all the things they did.
Most of my uncles worked in the shipyards, and then going back a bit further, some of my family worked on the coal barges, the Tom Puddings, the Tom Pudding system, which was all the tucks. That was the coal carrying. The person that invented them was called Thomas Bartholomew, so hence Tom. Tom's puddings, and people used to say they looked like a string of black pudding when they were all loaded. It was a whole infrastructure. So you had the tugs that pulled all the coal pans, the Tom Puddings. They'd get right up to Gull Docks, and there was 5 hoists that used to lift the Tom Puddings up, tip them into the coal boats.
The reason Gull was such an inland busy port was the fact that it was the link to every pit up here. Gull was Yorkshire's gold, wasn't it? That's why the Tom Pudding system was so unique and clever. My mum was quite an educated lady. Her and my dad were together for 60 odd years. She was always baffled how my dad's job was paid and classed as an unskilled job. He was taught by a boatman who had sailed barges, so the engine was a luxury. And if you ever went with my dad, the first thing you looked at was tide, water direction, wind, where he was going to hang a rule. It wasn't that engine up and let's go for it. He was always 3 steps ahead. If you didn't have an engine, you didn't have any brakes, you'd come up and just give you a cheeky wink, say, what happens if that don't happen? Because you'd always have a backup plan, and then there'd be a backup plan on a backup plan. That's what I said. They weren't educated men for sure, but the common sense of what they did was ferocious. The money was terrible. I mean, if we're going into it, we can say it now, 50 years later, the lads on the tankers were very clever. The pipeline that went ashore was full of petrol. They were supposed to have an airline and blow it through when they'd finished loading or unloading. That airline never got put on. They had a tap made. And you could fill 4 or 5 5-gallon drums up with petrol.
Yeah.
Now, my dad was on the Tom Pudding job, so they had 600 tonne coal a day. So obviously a few bags of that. So if you needed petrol for your car, you'd swap an 8-stone bag of coal for 5 gallon of petrol. But to see an entire industry doing that was quite funny, really. Foolishly, they issued them, what would you call, pack-up boxes. They were metal, they were black. The British Waterways stamped on them. You could get half a bag of coal in one of them. And they did. And they filled them up with coal and brought some every night. My dad's arm were dropping off. We know, but they said it was a terribly paid job, but we were never called because that was part of it. Yeah. Somebody in the police force reported it, got wind that they were putting coal in there. He filled the thing up with coal, set off walking, looked behind him, saw the copper behind him. Do you know, we lived in Chiltern Road and he walked right round Westfield Bank.
That's miles.
He walked 5 miles out. He walked all the time. The copper was just behind him. He walked, all right. And in Rutland Road, the copper tapped him on the shoulder and he said, I know what you've got in that box of yours. And my dad says, I know you know what I've got. And he said, well, where are you going? And he said, Chiltern Road. And he said, well, why have you gone 5 miles round there? And my dad said, to give you a bloody good walk. And it went to court. You couldn't make it up now. They had lumps of coal as evidence. And the chief inspector of the canals, he had to go in and he had to identify this coal. But imagine in a court picking, no, that's not our coal. So there's some great, you know, and that one, my dad, that was the way of life. There was all, you heard something every week from somebody else.
I used to cut the lengths of wire that went to another part in the workshop, and then to go from there to another one to have the detonator put on. When I worked there, it was just done for mining.
Yeah.
It weren't like for the war. No.
After Sprotborough, you go by the stone quarry, which I believe a lot of stone at one time used to be transferred down the river, come then the canal.
There was one place called Levitt Ag, and we called it Levitt Ag Lighthouse. Because there was a big wooden frame, like a crane, that you used to call that the lighthouse. I bet there's lots of people that don't even know it exists.
Levitag. I was born in 1952. My father was a quarry worker at Levitag, but not the original quarry. It's the one on the other side of the railway line, which you can still see. That is the one where he used to work. So the houses at Levitag were supplied for quarry workers and their families. We moved down to number 1 Levitag shortly after I was born, and we were there for 3 or 4 years. So there was the demand for lime from the limestone. Yeah. Originally, it was 1 cottage there, and I think at the end, it was about 24 cottages all the way along. The houses were built as close to the river as they possibly could, because with quarrying, they used explosives. It wasn't a safe place. I used to go with my father into the quarry as a child and help. He was a shot firer, and the limestone, when it exploded, used to travel in little lumps, but great distances. So they were built as close as they could to the river. I mean, the river played a huge part in their lives. It makes me skin crawl sometimes. He was under that 100-foot cliff with a flat cap on, no safety helmet. And the thing, it makes me shudder also. He used to take me there when I was about 6 or 7 on a Saturday. He said, do you want to come to work with me? There's no one down there. And I used to go right up to the cliff face with him. But he was a shot firer, so he had to go towards the cliff to put the dynamite. He used to get the dynamite and the detonators, and he used to put it into rocks. Sometimes big rocks came down. Sometimes really massive rocks. You used to have to drill into them and to put dynamite in that, and dynamite along the bottom of the cliffs. Whenever I was there, he was always clearing these big rocks out of the way. Funny stories that happened was, a couple of times in the evening, there was a knock at the door, and stood there was a policeman. And he said, oh, Fred, how are you? I said, all right, can you come and look at this stuff on the side of the road? This happened 2 or 3 times. And what they'd done is they'd found a detonator or some dynamite on the side of the road. And all they did was go up to it and look at it and say, no, it won't explode. Just get taken away by the army. The police said, all right, Fred, we'll take you back home. That was it. It was so informal. It's frightening, to be honest, because it used to make my mother laugh, because I said, I wonder what the neighbours think. Your dad keeps going off in police cars, you know. Dear me. But he worked 6 days a week. But he was up at 4 in the morning. I never saw him. He was gone by the time I got up. I think he used to start work at 6.
Doncaster District Angling Association has been around since 1911, as you can tell from this badge. Long before my time. People from Doncaster now don't have to travel anymore. It's on the doorstep. And we were ticking along nice, and then COVID came along and everybody started fishing, and his membership has increased since that time. Like I say, with work we've done with the fishing platforms and trying to keep things as tidy as we can, we do get some good feedback from people saying that we are doing a good job and we've got some of the best waters in the country. I mean, our figures, we increased our membership by a few hundred people, but if you went to Environment Agency figures regarding rod licences, it went into 1,000. There were maybe 50, 60,000 more licences sold during COVID. Buying a rod licence doesn't permit you to fish. You still need permission from whoever owns the fishery. The rod licences allows you to use a fishing rod. It's a tax on public only sporting country, lad, you know what I mean? But yeah, that's what it's for. Below 12, you don't need one. I think it's between 12 and 17, you get it for free, but you have to have it. Then after that, you have to go to having a full licence. There's a salmon licence as well, which is a lot dearer, but most coast, I think, just by a coast rod licence. We have got the odd salmon in down and sea trout, but they're not in vast numbers. So like carp, your pike, your perch, your roach, your bream. So coast fishing is mainly what all the run-of-the-mill species, what are in our rivers and canals and lakes and ponds sort of thing, yeah.
So there were very few opportunities for anglers in Sheffield to enjoy fishing. The number of rod licences sold was one of the highest in the country. People were travelling to the River Trent, Newark, they were going down to Boston and Wisbech and all. Special trains on a Sunday morning used to be absolutely packed solid. It's amazing. Imagine us working in a steelworks all week, filth and smoke and noise, to get out into a really rural environment where you could piece anglers of Barnsley used to have world championships, European championships, regularly at the top of the tree in those events. Angling is a very, very popular sport.
That's it for this episode. A big thank you to South Yorkshire Biodiversity Research Group for capturing people's memories, and thank you to the interviewees Ian Hurst, Jim Eames, Carol Neri, Rachel Walker, Chris Sherburn, Charles Day, Margaret Brammer, Stuart Goddard and Chris Firth. And thank you to the National Lottery Heritage Fund.